You can now find me on RoadStr, the app connecting people through cars.
Hello everybody, another sit down and talk from me. In today's topic we're going to discuss something that I think is almost a little piece of consumer advice. You'll have seen my clickbaity title, of course, the piece of paper worth more than gold that gets thrown in the bin. Well, there's two things we need to establish. First of all, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about car histories. For today's video, we also have the perfect sponsor, CarVertical. CarVertical is a super-powered super sleuth for any potential purchase, combining a number of different searches across the globe into one easy-to-read report, making car buying even easier and safer than ever before. With CarVertical, you'll be able to find out if your car has a hidden past, including accident damage, even for cars without a CAT marker, as well as undeclared imports, former taxis, or even clocked cars. And if you thought clocking was a thing of the 90s, you'd be wrong. CarVertical tells me that of all the BMW M5s they get reports for, nearly 1/3 have some description of mileage discrepancy. Best of all, we've secured a 20% discount on the service for you. To find out more, just follow the link in the description down below. Secondly, I need to show you that what I'm saying in the title is not actually total clickbait. To do that, we need to work out the price of a piece of paper if it were made out of gold. So here's a little bit of car history. This is actually two pieces of paper. Gold, as it happens, is currently worth an obscene amount, around £50 a gram. Quite a bit up on where it was. I checked this morning, it's up to about 48 or so. So I assume by the time this has gone out, it's probably worth 2 billion quid a gram. Anyway, an average piece of 80 grams per square metre A4 paper weighs roughly 5 grams. I sometimes like to use slightly posher paper, 120, 130 grams a square metre, or if I'm feeling very flash, 160. In fairness, 160 is basically card, not paper. But assuming 5 to 10 grams for a piece of paper, that means your piece of paper can be worth between 250 and 500 pounds. Not an awful sum. I was inspired to make this video by a recent visit to a dealership where I was looking at buying a new car. The Maserati is gone and I'm currently trying to think of what to replace it with. I have a few different options available to me and truthfully, I'm really not sure what avenue it is that I'm going to go down. But I found something up for sale that wasn't necessarily what I was looking for, but I thought would be a very cool car to have on the channel, provide some entertaining content for you all, and be something different from a brand I've never actually owned before. However, this is a car that has the old school single clutch automated manual style gearbox. I don't actually mind them anywhere near as much as I used to, but they do have a couple of drawbacks. One of the most significant being that because they are at heart still a manual gearbox, they will wear their clutch. Now, most cars with this sort of system, it's not especially cheap to replace the clutch. It can cost you several £1,000s. In fact, I was quoted, if the garage who was selling the car was to do it, around 5 grand. That's a lot. This car was at the sort of 50,000 mile mark, so it was reasonable to assume that a large car with a large engine and this format of gearbox would probably need a clutch at kind of that mileage. If it was a £500 job, you're not really going to worry. But at 5 grand, you are. So I went to go and look at this car, turned up, looked at it, and the car wasn't great. But I said, that's okay. Let's have a look at the service history. And they brought out the little book, and I had a flick through it, and all the stamps are there in the right places at the right time and everything. And I said, okay, this is great. This is wonderful. Where's the paperwork? I said, well, we don't have any. Well, why don't you have any? Oh, GDPR. Ah, right. This is the consumer advice bit. GDPR means some very, very specific things. It stands for General Data Protection Regulation, was introduced a few years ago and affected all businesses in Europe in a reasonably significant way. There are a few things that GDPR brought. I'll tell you about them now because not everybody even now seems to fully understand what it is. Essentially, the whole point of GDPR was to stop companies spamming you and to protect your privacy and your data. What I found very humorous was that the same company who said to me they've binned the service history for GDPR also signed me up to their newsletter without my express permission. I'm sure you've all bought something online and you found yourself 5 minutes later being inundated with emails and things you didn't ask for. And you might remember the dark old days of the internet where you had these little boxes and you're like, if you don't want us to send you inane crap every day, you have to untick these boxes. Well, a key part of GDPR, are you listening, piston heads, because you get it wrong as well. A key part of GDPR is you're not allowed to do that anymore. A customer has to take a positive action in order to be contactable by any means. In other words, you can't say, if you don't want our newsletter, you must untick these boxes. You must say, if you want our newsletter, you must tick these boxes. The default option always has to be that you won't pester people. I had a business a few years ago which had a client database. When GDPR came in, I had to email every single one of them and say, are you happy to continue receiving mails from me? Because if you're not, then I can't email you. Really sorry, some people do want the emails, but if you don't respond, if you don't actively say, we would like to hear from you, I can't message you. It's just simple as that. What's also particularly interesting is that this same company then said, no, we've binned all the service history for GDPR reasons. Well, this is just not the case. The GDPR does not stop service history being passed on. GDPR stops personal, private information from being passed on. If there's somebody out there that's more expert in this than I am, and I'm sure those people are out there, because I'm not expert at all, and I've got this wrong, please do correct me in the comment section down below. However, my understanding is this. You cannot pass on somebody's data, their name, their address, banking details, credit card information, all of that sort of stuff. But to pass on the details about what was done to a car at a particular service is no real breach of GDPR at all. To give you an example, most modern Ferraris from the sort of 458 onwards, they came with a 7-year free service plan. And when you take your car to Ferrari and they service it, you don't get charged. You may be charged for extra stuff if your car was broken or needed some work, but the service itself is covered by Ferrari. You essentially paid for it when you bought the car. And that then is just billed to Ferrari. So nobody's personal private information is on that service document. There's nothing there. It just says billed to Ferrari internal. That's it. You've not breached anyone's data. You've not, revealed anything specific about a person. You haven't done anything of the sort. But if you do chuck your history in the bin, you have done something rather significant. Let's get back to this example I was talking about a couple of minutes ago of this car with the single clutch automated manual gearbox and the 50,000 miles on the clock. This had no paperwork. And I said, well, what's the clutch life? Some manufacturers will be able to tell you what the estimated life on a clutch is. Some cannot. This was from one of the brands that cannot. Bit of a clue there for you in case you're trying to work out what it is I'm looking at. Anyway, so I said, okay, well, surely then I have to assume that this car needs a clutch. No. So the clutch is fine, the car drives great. And it probably does. And it might last another couple of thousand miles. But also, when these things fail, they can fail fairly quickly, and in 2,000 or 3,000 miles, I could be landed with a £5,000 bill. And I don't want that. And clutches are one of these funny things that when the internet gets its teeth into this sort of thing, it becomes rather a sticking point. I'm sure Porsche people will be familiar. Try and sell a car that hasn't had the IMS and RMS done. It's just impossible. It doesn't actually matter if the car needed it or not. The internet has got it in its head that these things do fail and they must be changed. So you wind up spending an awful lot of money changing something that maybe was actually going to be fine and last the rest of the life of the car. Clutches are a little bit different because they are a definite wear item. They do not last forever. The fact was, this car could have had a clutch 4 months earlier when it was last serviced. But without any kind of paperwork, without any sort of proof, you're going to always have to assume the worst. In this case, so well, surely it's going to need a clutch at some point. And more importantly, if I then try to sell that car later down the line, whoever wants to buy it off me when it's going to have even more miles is definitely going to want the clutch to have been done. So it's going to cost somebody £5,000 at some point, and I don't really fancy it being me. But if we happen to have the paper trail, we would know. To give you a good example, my Ferrari 550, I was speaking to a firm that deals with Ferrari stuff, and they had a 550 in, and there was a big problem with it. The engine had failed. thought, well, crikey, I don't really hear 550 failures very often. And they say, oh, no, there's this hose that kind of goes in between the V, and it can split. And if it splits, basically, it's going to be a bad time for your engine and obviously for your wallet. Oh, dear. But he said it was one of these things where if that part's been replaced, it's then good basically forever. I said, okay, well, what's the part? Gave me the part number. I got the 550's history folder out, went through. Oh, yep, there you go. In 2005, 15, 20,000 miles ago, that part was changed. Great. I can now sleep at night. Let me show you something. For every car that I have, I build a history folder. These lovely natty things. I've slightly changed how I do them recently. So this is for the S2000. This is not a particularly expensive or flashy car. Yet still, a big part of the S2000 for me is the fact that it has, you can kind of see that I'm being deliberately kind of not showing you, but that is solid. When people say this car comes with an inch-thick history folder, this car comes with an inch-thick history folder. Now, if I were to set fire to this, is it going to make it a worse car? No, of course not. But if I were to set fire to all of that, is it going to devalue the car? Certainly, because that is the car's story. That is the car's history. To give you another example, I went to look at a Jaguar a year or so ago, and the guy said it's got a full Jaguar service history, lovely one-owner car. So I said, okay, let's look at the history. I always look at the history of a car before I even test drive it. If the history isn't right, doesn't seem right, it's just not worth buying. You learn a lot from a car's history. You learn about the sort of people that have owned it, whether they've been willing to spend on it. When a car goes to a main dealer for a service, they'll usually do a little inspection sheet, and they'll give you the little traffic lights, green, yellow, red, and tell you what on the car might need doing. If they're the sort of owner that really cares, wants their car in tip-top condition, you'll see that they get those things tended to. However, if you go through a car's history and you see, actually it's never really had nice tyres put on it, and they've always put the cheapest brakes you can find on it, and also, say, MOT histories. Those are easier to find, and those are publicly available. You'll see cars that, say, for 5 years have had this one problem. They've had a little bit of rust here, they've had a little bit of rust here for 5 years. Then all of a sudden, this problem is gone. Or with a history folder, you'll be able to see whether the problem was rectified, or it just went to a slightly more liberal MOT station. You could be buying a car that has got a pre-existing problem, but the problem has been hidden, not fixed. Big difference between the two. You get to know as well the sort of pulse of a car. What do I mean by that? Well, each car in terms of spend has, I think, a rhythm. There's a heartbeat to it. Take, for example, a lot of the Ferraris. You might find, you get like £1,000 a year, £1,000, £1,000, £5,000, £1,000, £1,000, £5,000. It's like waves. Is it? They said every seventh wave is the big wave, and you want to make sure that you're not buying into the car after wave number 6, and what you're about to get is the big spend. You, in fact, want to be buying into a car that's just had the big spend done, and although it may not prevent you from having to spend more, hopefully it means that whatever comes to you is going to be just that little bit less evil, that little bit more friendly, that little bit more manageable. And as cars age, and if you've bought lucky and right, they turn into classics, history folders are something that can separate them, can differentiate the different examples out there. I was thinking, for example, of buying recently an old 911. I decided against it in the end because they are just daft money. There were 3 examples of the model I was thinking of up for sale, all in the same colour, all in very similar specifications, all with near to the mile the same mileage. So similar, in fact, that I thought 2 of them were the same car, but they were genuinely 3 different cars. It just so happened that they all seemed to stop at the same mileage. Mileage is another issue where if you've got a history folder, you'll be able to prove the car hasn't been clocked. Without a history, much more difficult. And so I started talking to all the different dealers that had an example of this old 911, and 2 of them had really strong history folders. One of them said, yeah, unfortunately, a few years ago, one of the dealers, he just binned the history. There's just nothing there. And when all 3 cars are all at the same price, well, that one then is out of the running. Last year, I got asked to sell an old Toyota Avensis on behalf of my girlfriend's family. This is a car they'd had from new, so at the time was 18 years old or something. Now, I know they have actually had that car serviced regularly. They've always spent on it whenever it's needed anything. However, they did not keep a scrap of paperwork for it. I had 1 piece of paper for the car for a recent spend on a hose that they had redone. That was it. Had they kept the full history, all the paperwork in a nice neat document folder, I could have got easily twice as much for that car as I actually did. So by getting rid of paperwork, you really are losing money. That was a Toyota Avensis, and that I could have got probably another £500-600 for. Doesn't sound like a lot, but let's be honest here, with a £1,000 car, that's a huge difference. That's 50% more I probably could have got for that car with just a bit of history. Then when you start to talk about the much newer, much more expensive cars, had this one thing I was looking at got a service invoice saying it had had a clutch done, I probably would have bought it. And as it happens, the dealer has now discounted that car by a considerable margin, probably because everyone that phones them asks if it's had a clutch done or if it's got any paperwork. I was talking about a Jaguar, wasn't I? I knew there was something I hadn't finished. So I went to look at this Jaguar, and modern Jaguars, they do an online service history. It's very boring. I don't like it because I like paper. I like being able to touch stuff. I'm a very sort of tactile person. However, the benefit of an online history is that you can't lose it. So this dealership, I went there, and it's a specialist dealer, so it's not a Jag dealer, it's an independent, but Jaguar was their thing. And I was looking through it, and I saw that the car got serviced at, 12,000 miles, 25,000 miles, then 50,000 miles. I went, oh, hang on a minute. There's a gap in the service history here, lads. They said, oh, well, we don't, well, it's a really good car, say, full history, one owner, yada, yada. So, hang on a minute. I'm sure it is a very good car and everything. It looks stunning. But there is a gap in the history. Well, that's all the paperwork we've got. So, well, that's a big gap. There's 25,000 miles between services, and I think the intervals are half that. But I said, it's very possible, because the interval missing was exactly double. It'd gone twice as long as it should have done between services. So maybe it's possible that actually it was serviced on time, but someone forgot to put the records in the computer. Someone didn't do it. It does happen even with online stuff. I said, oh, it was a very good car, say a one owner. I say, you keep saying that. But here's the great thing: if it's a one owner car, why don't you phone them? Phone them and ask them. Oh no, we can't do that. We can't do that, sir. Well, why not? Why not? Don't tell me GDPR. Oh well, actually, what it is you see, we get these cars Part X from the Jag dealer. The person didn't actually bring it to us. Ah, well, that explains everything. Because what's happened here is the Jaguar dealer got the car in. They looked at the service history and went, Mr. Clark, not his real name, you've forgotten to get your car serviced here, and you went double the interval. You didn't just go a couple of thousand miles over. You went 12,000 miles over the recommended service interval. We can't sell this car. We can't warranty this car. It was the kind of thing that a Jaguar dealer should have been retailing, but they know they can't. They can't support it. They don't want to back it. Which means, for you as a consumer buying this car later, maybe it would be fine. Maybe it will behave itself. But if you've got a car with a spotty service history, your chances of any kind of goodwill from any manufacturer are zero. If you haven't serviced the car in accordance with the manufacturer's schedule and you expect them to help you if it breaks in a big way, think again. Just not going to happen. So that would be another example where just having serviced the car properly, or even maybe kept the paperwork, would have potentially saved you an awful lot of money a little bit further down the line. That, I appreciate, is another video where I've gone off on a slight tangent, but I hope it was an enjoyable one nonetheless. So remember, kids, if you're getting your car serviced, no matter how much or how little it is worth, this stuff has a real value. If you're worried about your details being shared, get a pen, blank them out. Any half-decent, proper car dealer should be doing that. A dealer who says they had history and binned it, you must ask, were they getting rid of it because they were worried about breaching GDPR, or was there something in there they were trying to hide? Food for thought. Hope you've enjoyed today's mini episode. There is another to come at some point, although I really cannot remember what it was about. At some point I will. Anyway, for now, thanks for listening. If you watched, thanks for watching. Please like, comment down below. I'm sure you've all got some entertaining stories about service history and paperwork. If you do, please share them. But remember, no personal or private information. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.